Go ahead,
Tom, I
Ian.
want to ask you. So you were saying that you don't believe that things are going to be different this time, right? With crypto, and we're going to wait for December 16th to see what happens. So I want to ask you, right? Inflation. That's all we hear about. Inflation, inflation, inflation. Ben believes we're going to hit deflation and things are going to reverse on us, and we're not going to see that hyperinflation. What is your take on the inflation narrative?
I don't think we'll see deflation. I don't know. I'm not a forex monetary expert, global scale. Maybe we do. I don't know.
So
I
my
don't
question
think we
is,
will.
how would inflation affect the crypto markets? In better worded, is how do you see the
fair.
inflation narrative affecting crypto?
Well, I think that we came out with these numbers now. What's 6.8% or something?
That's 6.8% on CPI,
BS number.
Which is BS.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a BS number. I think, I remember as a kid, I think a quarter, I put like a quarter in a soda machine and I would get like a 20-ounce soda. Now that same one's like $2.50 or $2.99. That's not 6%. Even if you like calculated back all those years, that's not 6%. I think it's been way higher for way longer than they've ever stated. I think that their kind of metrics are outdated. They're not really measuring inflation. Houses in my area are up 100% in the last year.
Yep.
I think we're just going to continue to see inflation. If I'm wrong, which, like I said, I'm not an expert in this field. If I'm wrong and we see deflation, I think that, honestly, I think Bitcoin could have a strange response to that. A narrative when I started was...
Or to inflation?
Yes, to deflation.
To deflation.
I think it could be surprising. What I was getting to is when I started in crypto, and probably you guys too, there was a narrative kind of tinfoil hattish again, but was more doomsy. When everything crumbles, we'll have Bitcoin and Bitcoin will be resilient.
Yes.
That narrative has largely been lost, I've noticed, in the last years. Maybe people, is the first time they've heard it. I don't know. But the Bitcoin was built kind of for a catastrophe. It doesn't have to like literally be one, but it was built to be resilient in bad economic times. And so if we see deflation, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised to see Bitcoin continue kind of on its own path.
I think
I see it thriving.
I think it's interesting though, and this is the only reason that, well, there's a couple reasons, but one of the reasons that I could there's two main reasons that I could see the deflation. Number one, the whole world, if the United States continues with the inflation narrative, the whole world's going down with it at some point. I'm not saying how far, but at some point that's happening.
Unless they're holding Bitcoin like El Salvador.
Well, yeah, but hey, that's, obviously that's fantastic. But the second thing is, and this is the one that's really interesting to me, a lot of these big banks, guess what they're starting to do? They're starting to not loan money. Why would they do that? Because ultimately deflation does exactly like if inflation was legit, they would continue to, you know what I mean? They would continue to pump out loaning money, and that would make sense. So if they're stopping, it either means A, that they're just nervous about the economy as a whole and people aren't going to be able to pay their debts. That is one option. I do believe that. But secondly, that, hey, you know what? The actual real value of debt is about to go up because of deflate. Like, what does that look like? I think it's really interesting.
You know what banks are also doing? Buying Bitcoin. That's probably why they're not loaning that money out.
Too busy buying Bitcoin.
Well, you think instead of they're taking the same capital, they're holding their cash and they're holding their fiat and putting it into Bitcoin.
Hey, every day we're hearing articles of the largest banks in different nations buying Bitcoin, right? Getting into Bitcoin. So it would make perfect sense that they would stop lending out money to use that cash to invest it somehow, whether it's through an ETF in Canada or whatever, or put it somewhere like the Grayscale. So they're trying to get something out of it. They're not just going to be holding cash forever. I do think they see inflation happening. I honestly don't agree with the deflation narrative. I could be completely wrong, but I've told you, Nick, multiple times that I don't agree with that. I think when they're using these words right now as tapering, we're going to start tapering. They printed 40% of the circulating supply of US dollars in the last 18 months, right? Yeah. That is a scar on the US dollar that will not be erased by tapering now.
I agree.
And for any time soon, that 40% will still exist in circulating supply for a very long time.
Yeah. Didn't they just walk back the tapering statement anyway?
Did they? I don't know.
I thought they
Maybe
walked
they
it
did.
back.
No. They walked back. They walked back. The inflation is transitory.
Okay, transitory.
Okay.
Yeah,
transitory. Now I'm talking about tapering off.
Yeah,
I would love for them. I would love for them to be buying Bitcoin, and that's the reason they're not lending money. I would love that. I don't really believe that.
Well,
So
I mean, the CIA,
cause.
the CIA holds a bunch of Bitcoin, right?
Well, I was gonna say,
government agencies
I believe
hold
every
Bitcoin.
government. I believe every government on this planet of, I don't know, any reasonable size at this point, in some way, whether it's direct or not, owns Bitcoin.
Oh, 100%.
Has some sort of exposure to it. That it's
Mhm.
part of the reason why I'm surprised, not surprised, but the spot ETF in the United States I think the reason that it has not been approved yet is because it is going to be such a windfall of capital that the stock market would literally be like, oh, well, why are we going to invest in it? I think they need more time. And I think it is just a brick wall. It is saying, no, not yet. We need to get ourselves positioned. I think, and this might sound wild, but I think that the stock market is going to be on the blockchain at some point before too terribly long. And I think there needs to be a lot of regulations that happen prior to that. And then I think as that pivot happens, then all of a sudden, maybe the stock market stays open 24 hours. You can literally 24 hours, 7 days a week. That needs to freaking happen. It's not like these companies aren't making money while we sleep, right? So what is the point of closing things down?
But they don't like that, right? They don't like that because then they would have to, look what happened with GameStop.
They don't like the transparency of it, is what they don't.
Not just the transparency, but what would happen when the same thing that happened with GameStop, right? These hedge funds were losing massive amount. They instantly called up and said, hey, stop trading right now. Who are they going to call at 4 a.m? Who's going to be up looking at that stuff and say, hey, stop this right now. We're losing millions and millions of dollars here, right? So I think they don't like that.
Let's be fair. The exchanges, we've all been through this. The exchanges, when they ultimately, they all go down
that's centralized exchanges, right? That's why you got to be on the decentralized exchanges.
Agreed, but the decentralized exchanges are so flooded. If you're trading ERC20 tokens or trying to get into
then maybe you should be, holding some of this and not so much.
You act like I'm not holding this.
What's interesting? We were talking about lending money, and I actually don't know the numbers on banks and what they're doing. It's not something I pay attention to really, but what I think is interesting is look at the demand right now for dollars, to borrow dollars in crypto. I think that's an interesting contrast because there's a massive demand. Clearly 9-10% APY worthy. You see that across many platforms. So,
but I don't think they're using it to get into fiat, Tom. I think a lot of them are using it to get into either a stable coin or another asset, basically to pack more of their bags. I don't think a lot of people are going straight into fiat. Now, I think it's happening for sure because people need to take profits, but they don't want to pay to have the taxable event happen. But I would argue that I think a lot of it, depending on the timing, is saying, you know what, I want to expand what I'm doing without coming out of pocket. On the other side of things, I don't know. I think it's super interesting.